mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 2, Episode 4 of the HBO Max original series, Raised by Wolves, entitled Control. Control seems to have like a dual meaning here in this episode, maybe even like I don't know what the three version the three version of dual is, a try meaning. But we have a pretty surface level interpretation of the term. Mother's making a control chip at one point for the serpent that she tests out on a bird. It seems to be effective. I'm going to talk a little bit about that scene later. But then also there's a less obvious interpretation of that title, because we see a shift in the balance of control or power. This moves from the trust to Mother. She's now in control of the camp. But we also see control being lost, as in Marcus seems to lose control. They haven't delved into it too much, but you could see it kind of starting with Marcus kind of starting to lose control over his group because he now no longer has Mother's eyes inside him. So now Decima and the others aren't feeling that same vibe from him that they've been getting throughout the rest of the season. So like I said, control in a literal sense, but then also control shifting from the trust to Mother, and then control shifting from Marcus to, who knows, maybe also to Mother. We'll see. But I said last week that while I've enjoyed this season to this point, that it's been fairly uneventful. And I swear, anytime I say some shit like that, it's almost like the showrunners hear me and they go, oh, okay, well, we got something for you now. And this episode was incredible. Like, this was packed with so many big moments. And this really throttled the plot forward. So, yeah, this episode was an exciting one, to say the least. So I'm going to go over some of the important pivotal moments that happened in this episode, and then I got a couple of thoughts to wrap up. So I'm going to start with Paul. We see in this episode Paul gets poisoned by the mouse that was given to him by the Trust. I can't remember if it was said in the show or if it was in the comments of one of these videos, but some people already suspected that the mouse, including myself, that the mouse was not, I don't want to say not a real mouse, it was a real mouse, but that this was not a good, well-intentioned move by the Trust, that the mouse was some sort of setup. And it ended up being just that. And it doesn't take out Marcus, but it takes out Paul, who turns into like this bulbousy kind of like cocoon thing. And it takes out this one other guy as well. And Marcus holds Decima partly responsible for this because she, she's favored her android daughter, who, Marcus don't fuck with androids at all, so he's not happy about that. But then also, her daughter is the individual that led Paul and Campion back to where they were in the first place. So he holds her responsible for this and basically says, make it right. Like, you're my son, my real life flesh and blood, well, not his son technically, but, a real human person who is important to Marcus appears to be on death's doorstep because she favored a android. So laying that guilt trip, when you couple that particularly with the fact that they essentially worship Marcus here, and it makes it so that she's in a position where she feels like she has to do something that she probably doesn't want to do. But it is what it is, right? So she, at some point, they being everyone but Marcus, starts to, I can't remember where they're going, but Campion decides he's not going to go with them, and he takes off. And Decima sends the daughter after Campion, and the other adult male that joined Marcus's crew later goes after them as well. So that's kind of like the start of things starting to escalate. And then back to the scene, the control scene with Mother and Sue. Like, that scene was interesting because that was a scene where you had to do a lot of reading in between the lines here. Like, what was being said on the surface was not the point. It was the subtext there that was important. And, Sue seems to kind of be trying to hint toward Mother that she knows the serpent is actually her kid and is trying to get her to admit it. But then Mother is also playing this game of like, don't fuck with me. Like, I know what's going on here, and I'm willing to do what I have to do to protect my kids. So, yeah, she says something like, what did she say? Like, I'm capable of properly assessing danger. Because on the surface level, it was about, is the serpent safe? But I think the subtext there is Mother letting Sue know that she's capable of assessing if Sue is about to become a danger or a problem. So I like that scene because what was on the surface was not what we were meant to take away from it. We were meant to take away Sue's implications about the serpent to Mother and Mother's implications to Sue about Sue's involvement. So I thought that was a really cool scene as well that one you could kind of easily sleep on. There's also a scene, so after Campion leaves and the android daughter goes after her, the android daughter gets grabbed by what looks kind of the same as Father's android. And I'm thinking like, okay, it grabbed her ankle, which was injured. She's an android. The thing seems to like fuel blood. It just made me wonder, like, what is this thing? And is this the thing that's responsible also for what was that thing, like a research tank or whatever that they thought was the serpent, but then they found out the serpent wasn't impervious to the acid water? Like, what if this thing, and maybe not even this individual one, maybe a group of them are responsible for that killing? And then also, what are these things? Like, I don't know if these are supposed to be like those, how they were saying that individuals or humans were devolving on this planet, or and they were kind of like, I think, like decaying or becoming androids or something, like not becoming androids, but like there was something wrong with the humans on that planet. They thought there were monsters there, but they weren't monsters. They were devolved humans. Is this the further de-evolution of these beings? Are these things? Is Father's android one of these? Which I believe it is, because I mean, like, the thing's been soaking up fuel blood. I mean, it seems to be an android. Is it one of those that maybe ceased to be functional and Father's bringing it back to life with the fuel blood? We know. Well, I'm not gonna go too far into that right now, but I'll save that. I'll save a little bit more for that for later. But yeah, I'm wondering what this thing is supposed to be, and Campion kills it, and he seems to have a bit of remorse about it, but at the same time, he did what he had to do to save his friend. Well, I'm not even gonna say his friend. He clearly has a crush on this girl. But yeah, we need to learn some more about these things. So back to Father, he dumps the fuel blood that he won in his fight onto this android, and nothing appears to happen at first. They leave, and then we see the fuel blood that's been spilled onto the table being soaked into the android, and that's all we see at that moment. But later, it appears that we see what we later find out is that android saving Campion because he's about to get captured by the adult who was chasing after him and the android daughter. And then this being comes and it's shining this bright light, and Campion escapes when the adult guy like shields his face from it. And at the time, I'm like wondering, like, what is this thing? But again, we'll get back to that. Another thing that I thought was really cool in this episode was once Decima's daughter returns and has essentially allowed Campion to escape, she makes it right. And this scene where she like cuts up her face is pretty ridiculous. And you got to think too, like, this is well, one, we already have this thing about breaking the neck, which, okay, did this happen to the daughter originally? Did this happen to the android and and the android recalls it, or is the android recalling it from the daughter's memories? This is a situation where whatever happened to this daughter, Decima felt like it was worthwhile to implant an android with the daughter's memories and have it look like the daughter. So for all intents and purposes, it's the daughter. Like, she's trying to say it's not, but like it kind of is. And it also raises that question, that debate of, what makes someone human. Like, yeah, it might be an android body, but if it's got her face and it's got her personality and her memories and all that kind of shit, like, how big of a difference are we talking about here? So for her to I don't want to say easily, but for her to be able to like cut that face up like that was a rough scene to watch, man. And like I said, this episode had a whole lot of wild shit that made it really entertaining. And that scene was ridiculous. And then she runs and jumps off that cliff, nuts. So moving on to my favorite scene, which was once Mother and Campion make it to Marcus's camp. They have an interesting kind of like science versus religion debate where Mother is essentially talking about saving Paul via, taking him back to the camp and having science help him, versus essentially Marcus's idea praying to help him. Like, Soul will take care of it. She's like, well, we can actually take him somewhere to get him not fixed, but like, to get him cured or helped, rather than just sitting here and praying about it. So like there's an interesting your atheist versus religious conversation there. And then they start to fight, and Marcus clearly has the upper hand with his powers. And then ironically, I loved how, for like an android, in a situation where an android is losing to a human, and they had just got done debating religion versus science, and the android was making the pro-science argument, that the android is then saved by something that feels very religious, which was Campion slinging this rock like he's David and Goliath, like he's David. And I was like, wow, that's interesting that Mother was saved by in a way that immediately reminds everyone of like a Bible story. At least it did for me anyway. I don't know if you guys felt that way, but I'm looking like, okay, Mother was saved by David. Interesting. And then, like, the coolest part of the episode, well, what started, I would say, the coolest part of the episode, the coolest sequence, Mother, like, moves her eyes through Marcus's body with, like, her hand is like a magnet. And, like, if you have, like, a strong magnet and you put something metal, like, say, on the bottom end of a table, you can move that thing across the table. Or if you do it the opposite way, put it on top of the table and put the magnet on the bottom, you can move that object across the table if the magnet's powerful enough, through that table. And she was doing that with his body, like her hand was a magnet and the eyes were metal, and she was moving her hand across his body. You could see the light of the eyes moving across and up through his throat and out of his mouth. That was so cool. And I don't know when I said it, but at some point in these videos I said, I really hope Mother gets her eyes back at some point, because the coolest thing about her was that necromancer shit. So I was like literally like cheering when she's getting her eyes back. And then she heads back to the trust, and she does her necromancer shit. Like, they try to take her out, no good. She eventually makes her way in with Paul and has a confrontation with the trust after she drops off Paul to Sue. And basically, she takes over. She shuts down the trust. She, says, hey, I want... I think she first asked for the antidote. The trust says there's no antidote. And she's just like, well, promise you won't do it again and you'll help me find a cure. And the trust is like, fuck you. And she was like, all right, well, fuck you. And she shuts the trust down. So... And this is when she takes over control. And there's a lot of reticence here because, obviously she's an android. They're like, okay, why do we want an android in charge? She's like, look, I'm not here to be the boss of you. Like, I don't want any parts of this. I'm going to pass this on to a human as soon as y'all can pick one. But just for right now, I'm here to serve you, and I will help you in any way I can. It was very much like a political stump speech, which I thought was pretty interesting. But, I wonder if Mother is going to relinquish this power or this control as easily as she claims she will, especially with her eyes back. I feel like Mother constantly grapples with this, like, her inclination to be motherly versus her inclination to be necromancery. So we'll see how that plays out. But regardless, I'm super interested in where this is going. Let's see. So where am I? Oh, I love the part where she's debating back and forth with the trust about whether or not this was a good move. And she's like, you went after my kids or whatever. And the trust essentially makes the argument that those three lives, the lives of those three kids, were not as important as the lives they could save if they took out Marcus. And he says something like, well, had the plan been successful? And she screams, but it wasn't. I was like, whoo, boy, you better stay away from her mother if you done hurt her kids, man, even if she's an android. Especially if she's an android with necromancer eyes. You definitely want to stay away from her. But yeah, that was a super cool scene, too. I really enjoyed that. So Marcus, another big moment, Marcus returns, and Decima, returns veinless, which at the beginning of the episode, I'm noting, like, okay, he's definitely getting veinier. He returns veinless after he loses to Mother. Decima immediately notices this, notices like the lack of an aura, like he doesn't feel the same. She kisses him, it doesn't feel the same. So he's already kind of losing his acolytes. So that's going to be, again, like I said at the top of the video, Marcus losing control. That's where we seem to be heading with that. And then we close with Father's android having escaped, and we see the same lit up being that Campion thought was Soul just outside after having gone through the roof. And I'm assuming it went through the roof, it went and saved Campion, and then it came back. So it looks like Father's android is not only fully functional, but also the same being that saved Campion in the woods. And now we're left to wonder, what is this thing? So I have a couple thoughts, and then I'm gonna wrap this one up. I liked that Father was like talking shit after they left the his fight thing. I'm gonna read his quote. He said, "I hope your ears were not damaged by the cheers my victory elicited." Like, that's an android talking shit, and I love that because I loved how. What was the thing I said earlier? Like earlier in an earlier video where I said something like it was like android dirty talk, where he's like, "Oh my, what was it? My whatever it is where they talking about like their caretaker." He's like, my caretaker readings are up or something like that. She's like, my caretaker readings are up too. I'm like, this is android dirty talk. But I like that they continue to kind of humanize the androids, humanoid, humanize the androids via things like this, where you got like dirty talk, shit talking. I don't know. I just think that's pretty cool. And what I mostly want to talk about here in the thoughts, and I'm not going to talk about it for very long, but Hunter tells Father that the comment that Campion repeated to him about Father being the toughest service model android was something that he just told Campion because he wanted Campion to stop freaking out about about Father dying. And that raised the question to me, does that also mean that he was lying when Campion said that his Father could transfer his consciousness to other beings? Was that also a lie that Hunter told him? Was that true? Because I like the idea of the android that Father brought back, because we've already had multiple moments where Father has quote unquote died. If Father transfers his consciousness into this other android, and now he has powers too, similar to Mother, because then now that could create a more interesting dynamic, because now you have, let's just say for the sake of argument, they are equally powered, just in different ways. You have a high-powered necromancer who is also a caretaker / mother, but then you also have Father, who just seems to think a little bit more logically, think a little bit more sensibly, think a little bit more safely, a little bit more cautious, but now could also be highly powered. So I like the idea of that potentially happening. So I hope that that wasn't a lie, but I guess we'll see going forward. I don't know how many episodes we have left, but I think there's plenty of time to kind of play around with the idea of Father putting his consciousness into this other android. So, like I said, this episode was really good, really fun. A whole lot happened, really cool stuff. And yeah, the season appears to have completely turned up, and I think we're gonna be in for a hell of a ride for the rest of season 2. So I will see you guys. I can't say next week because I got this out late. Sorry about that, by the way. Last Thursday was a very busy day for me as far as getting videos out. I think I put out like 3 last Thursday, and I didn't get around to recording and putting this out, but I did watch it on Thursday. But so I can't say I'll see you guys next week. I'll see you later this week on Thursday, and I will put it out on Thursday for episode 5. Peace.